Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video we're going to react to the 10 worst things to happen at Christmas. Man, I mean, what could have possibly happened here? There's bound to be people who have passed away on Christmas, but aside from that, people pass away every day. Not to say it's not sad, but it's a reality of life. But, have catastrophes happened on Christmas? I'm guessing maybe.
Merry Christmas, sir. Merry Christmas.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most bloody or horrific disasters occurring on or near Christmas.
You sort of imagine a disaster like this to be in appalling weather and driving rain and howling gales, and it was just the most perfectly tranquil day.
The USSR invades Afghanistan.
At the time, no one knew, but they were sure of one thing. The situation in the Afghan provinces was becoming extremely serious, especially close to the Pakistan border, where a large number of anti-communist combatants had taken refuge.
Christmas Eve 1979 marked the beginning of one of the longest and bloodiest boondoggles in Russian history. That day, the Soviet Union launched its invasion of Afghanistan. What began as a covert operation to prop up a faltering communist government quickly spiraled into a decade-long quagmire. Years of death, displacement, and despair would follow.
They said they'd been invited in to repel foreign intervention after a coup. In truth, President Hafizullah Amin was killed in his Darul Aman palace, not by Afghans, but by Soviet special forces, the Spetsnaz.
The invasion was brutal, marked by scorched earth tactics, indiscriminate bombings, and the use of landmines that still haunt Afghan soil. It devastated Afghan society, creating millions of refugees. It also sparked one of the Cold War's fiercest proxy battles, as the U.S. armed Mujahideen fighters. Hundreds of thousands of Afghan civilians would be killed in the conflict.
Oh my God.
Soviet army, as bad as it performed in a lot of cases in Afghanistan in the 80s, did a lot better than the Russians are doing in Ukraine.
Congo Christmas massacre.
Gosh, sad. Hundreds of thousands. That's such a big number of people, isn't it?
We've just arrived at Bakande village, which is one of the sites of recent attacks. And the first thing you see when you come into the village are the graves where people have been trying to bury their loved ones.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is no stranger to tragedies, and the year 2008 ended with a horrific one. After weeks of unrest and violence, Christmas of 2008 provided few tidings of comfort and joy. The Lord's Resistance Army, a terrorist Christian cult, unleashed a devastating and murderous rampage. As the holiday began on Christmas Eve, the LRA attacked villages across the Ovali province. More than 600 people were slaughtered in ways too brutal to describe here. They also abducted dozens of people, including children, committed acts of sexual violence against women, and razed whole villages to the ground. This massacre was part of the LRA's long campaign of terror, leaving scars that persist today.
Some were killed here. How many were killed here?
5.
And then they stopped here and killed another 5 men.
Erzincan.
Man, human beings, man. Some of the things that we can do to each other really blows my mind. Just so savage.
Earthquake. Uncertainty reigned everywhere during Christmas of 1939 as the world braced for the storms of war. In the midst of this, Turkey faced a natural disaster. An earthquake struck the Erzincan region on December 27th with devastating force, 7.8 magnitude on the Richter scale. Entire villages were leveled, leaving over 32,000 dead. Countless more were injured or left homeless in the frigid winter. Amid the cheer of bells and carols in other corners of the globe, Erzincan's silence was deafening. It was broken only by the cries of survivors and the creak of collapsing timber. This was a Christmas season not marked by joy, but by resilience in the face of ruin. The Italian Hall disaster.
Someone yelled fire, and there were, I think, one very narrow entrance to the second floor. It resulted in a stampede to get out.
Shouting fire in a crowded theater is a classic cautionary tale, cited by law schools everywhere as an exception to the First Amendment.
It's like the boy who cried wolf, isn't it?
But for attendees at the 1913 Christmas Eve party at the Italian Hall, it wasn't just a metaphor. It was a deadly reality. Striking copper miners and their families gathered for a holiday party that night in Calumet, Michigan. They sought a brief respite from their grueling fight against exploitative mine management. The hall was packed with joy and solidarity until an unidentified figure yelled, "Fire!" in the crowded room. Chaos erupted. There was no fire, but the rush to escape turned tragic as 73 people, most of them children, were crushed in the narrow staircase.
In 1913, no one said that the doors opened the wrong way. If it had been the case, it would have been in the news, it would have been in the reports, but it wasn't.
The Tangiwai train disaster.
Jeez, man. You got to be careful. Like, these sort of crushes and things like that happen today still. Like, I don't know whether you guys have heard of the Hillsborough disaster that happened, what was it, like the 90s or something like that? Like, loads of people died. Like, it was a football match in Liverpool.
Esther.
Hey, stop! Stop the train!
Christmas Eve 1953 should have been a day of peace for New Zealanders, but nature had other plans. Mount Ruapeu's volcanic crater silently burst, spilling a deadly mixture of mud, water, and volcanic debris down its slopes. The raging torrent overwhelmed the nearby dam, holding back the crater lake. It proceeded downwards, weakening the rail bridge at Tangiwai. On Christmas Eve, an express train packed with holiday travelers barreled unknowingly toward disaster. The engineer saw the damage, but it was too late. He braked, saving the back half of the train as the front plunged into the Fungahu River below. Of the 285 passengers, 151 perished in the icy waters, making it New Zealand's worst rail tragedy.
I couldn't believe what I saw, actually. A lighted carriage on its side, floating down its side with the lights on and the river, and then it suddenly went out.
The Library of Congress burns.
Yeah, because trains, like, because they're so heavy, they take ages to slow down, don't they? Do you ever think, like, the technology on trains will get to the point where they brake like a car, or is it just not physically possible with the amount of weight of the carriages and the people inside?
Its elaborately decorated interior, embellished by works of art from nearly 50 American painters and sculptors, link the United States to classical traditions of learning and simultaneously flexed American cultural and technological muscle.
The Library of Congress has a history of fiery heartbreak. Its first collection ended in flaming ruin in 1814, when British troops torched the Capitol during the War of 1812. Congress rebuilt the nation's library the next year, purchasing over 6,000 volumes from Thomas Jefferson's personal collection.
Congress accepted and paid nearly $24,000 for 6,487 books, which more than doubled the size of the original collection.
But on Christmas Eve 1851, disaster struck again. A broken chimney flue sparked the conflagration in the library's main room. Nearly 2/3 of the book collection, including much of Jefferson's priceless donation, was destroyed. All told, the fire devoured 35,000 books, manuscripts, and maps, turning what should have been a season of cheer into one of cultural loss.
God.
This may be the coolest building I've ever been in.
It is.
Christmas flood.
Because, yeah, those were, they're gone. Like, there wasn't any sort of internet or scanners that you could use to make backups of, these books. Like everything gets archived now, doesn't it? Pretty much every rare book has been, scanned and archived like forever.
A city which at its lowest lies 6 meters below sea level has for centuries had to work out how to keep the people dry. If you didn't know how they do it nowadays, you wouldn't even notice.
Hollanders were treated to anything but a Merry Christmas during the winter of 1717. As families gathered to celebrate, a devastating storm surge from the North Sea swept across the country, breaching dikes and inundating low-lying regions. Known as the Christmas flood, it was one of the deadliest disasters in Dutch history and also affected Germany and Scandinavia. The icy waters claimed around 14,000 lives, leaving entire communities submerged and
man, this list is way more horrific than I thought it'd be. I thought there'd be like an occasional, car crash or something like that. This is just way worse.
Countless homes destroyed, villages disappeared, livestock drowned, and survivors faced a frozen wasteland where holiday cheer was replaced by mourning.
The next time I say, let's evacuate. Let's evacuate. Whatever you say, honey.
The Dutch, long masters of water management, were humbled by nature's ferocity. The tragedy underscored the peril of living below sea level and sparked renewed efforts to fortify their defenses.
The Netherlands was forced to address its geographic weakness in 1953 when a huge storm pushed the North Sea inland. Nearly 2,000 people died.
Ku Klux Klan founded.
We aim to pull evil up by the root before it chokes out the flower of our culture and heritage.
The holiday season of 1865 was bittersweet. The Civil War had ended, slavery was abolished, and a nation began to heal. But it was also a time of profound uncertainty. Abraham Lincoln was gone. Reconstruction's uncertain future loomed, and not everyone embraced the promise of equality. On Christmas Eve in Pulaski, Tennessee, a small group of Confederate veterans met. Cloaking their revanchist ambitions in sinister secrecy, they founded the Ku Klux Klan.
Its name was inspired by the Greek word for circle. Nathan Bedford Forrest was the Klan's first imperial wizard, and the hoods and robes were used to frighten black people in their homes.
What began as a fraternity quickly became a terror organization. The KKK wielded violence and intimidation to uphold white supremacy and undermine the fragile progress of Reconstruction. Instead of goodwill and peace, these men sowed fear and hatred, casting a dark shadow over the country in the decades to come. Indian Ocean.
It's just dumb to me. Like, to just say that you don't like everybody of a certain race is just so dumb. Like, there's going to be, bad people in all races. So why would you just generalize and say all black people are this or that or whatever? Like, it's just do you see what I mean here? Like, it's just really, really dumb. I don't get it.
Tsunami.
As a journalist, I kind of like losing sense of reporting something because I don't know where to start. Everywhere is flat.
Boxing Day, December 26, 2004, began with joy, but ended in unimaginable tragedy as the Indian Ocean unleashed one of history's deadliest natural disasters. A massive earthquake off the coast of Sumatra triggered a tsunami that swept across more than a dozen countries, from Indonesia to East Africa. Entire villages were swallowed by walls of water, leaving devastation in their wake.
To be fair, that would be so scary. Like, you're holding on for dear life.
Almost 230,000 lives were lost. Families were instantly torn apart. Communities erased in moments. Beaches, once filled with holiday revelers, transformed into scenes of chaos and unimaginable destruction. The tsunami struck with little warning, its ferocity unmatched, turning a season of peace into one of worldwide mourning.
These are some of the 140,000 homes built by the international community since the tsunami.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Black Christmas.
They were old propaganda pictures from the neighboring American POW camp, for which the prisoners were forced to stage happy-looking occasions.
December 7th, 1941, will forever be remembered for the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. But a day later, Japanese forces also launched their assault on the British colony of Hong Kong. Outnumbered more than 2 to 1, Allied forces held their ground for 17 brutal days. But on Christmas Day, with defenses shattered and supplies exhausted, Hong Kong fell.
At 3 p.m., the British commanders officially surrendered to the forces of Imperial Japan. The Union Jack was lowered.
For the survivors, surrender marked the beginning of a nightmare. Japanese troops unleashed a wave of atrocities, executions of POWs, sexual violence against countless women, and mass looting spread throughout the city. Outlying villages were decimated. Civilians,
I mean, they've surrendered. Like, why? Like, they've given up.
Were starved to death or murdered outright.
Jesus.
Afterwards, the end of the Battle of Hong Kong would come to be known as Black Christmas.
Many expected to be treated civilly, according to the rules of the Geneva Convention. They were sadly mistaken. Over the next 3.5 years of captivity, many of the living would come to envy the dead.
Do you know of other horrors unleashed onto the
Scary, very, very cruel.